Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.Buzz, and it's a pleasure to welcome back to the Innova.Buzz podcast, Anna Addoms of Wicked Marvelous. Anna was our guest on episode 671, where we explored human-centered AI until we encountered a technical hiccup. I don't know whether the AI was getting its revenge on us, but it kind of interrupted that episode, and it felt like we were just uncovering the complexity of the most compelling questions around ethics and around AI and human connection. So I'm keen to really feel that momentum again. Welcome back to the Innova.Buzz podcast, Anna. It's a real privilege to speak with you again.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. And I'm also excited to continue our conversation.
Yeah. Now, before we dive in, I just thought I'd say a quick note for our listeners, especially if you're new to the Innova.Buzz podcast. So each podcast's a candid conversation and a practical conversation with a remarkable guest exploring how they can create impact, how they build human connection in their work. And we aim to unpack their knowledge, their attitudes, their values, and how those translate into some meaningful action that perhaps you, the listener, can incorporate into your daily activities. We start with a big picture, then dig into stories, strategies, actionable ideas that you can use right away. At the end, we wrap up with our signature buzz round. There are 3 rapid fire questions I ask every guest. So that's a bit of continuity throughout each episode. Think of this as a seat at the table. So you're here with me and Anna learning together. All the resources and highlights will always be in the show notes, so you can revisit anything that sparks your curiosity at any time in the future. Anna, picking right up where we left off last time when we were kind of talking about AI's ethical considerations, do you see a profound shift that's required in our thinking when we consider building lasting, authentic relationships in this digital landscape?
I do and I don't. I think one of the biggest things that we really have to consider is transparency. Fundamentally, if you are transparent with how you use it and the way it's being used so that you are not taking ownership of something that you didn't do, or that you aren't going off on a wild goose chase or selling yourself on expertise that is not your own, then it's a tool. And fundamentally, we need to describe how we use tools in our businesses. And sometimes that doesn't matter because it's happening in the back office. So it doesn't matter to anybody that's not an internal stakeholder. But if you are ever using AI in any capacity in a forward-facing, client-facing, to the general public way, we need to start disclosing how we use it. We are also talking about ways that we are detecting AI now. So if you don't disclose and you get caught saying you didn't use AI, that's not a good look either. So my biggest rule is be transparent. Understand that there are ethical considerations, that not everybody is going to be comfortable with the fact that you choose to use AI. But it is also not going anywhere. It's becoming part of the lay of our digital landscape in almost every way. So recognize that disclosing it, being transparent, showing people where it is, especially if it's interactive, is the answer. But fundamentally, if you treat it like a tool and not like a replacement, then you shouldn't be running into so many of those concerns. And admittedly, I can say that today in June of 2025, and I might give you a completely different answer in 6 months or a year, given that this is changing so fast.
Yeah, things are moving rapidly, aren't they? I'm working a lot on refining my prompts, doing 2 things. The first thing is I'm getting a lot of pattern recognition now from what the AI outputs. And the classic one is the M dash, like connecting words with this long dash. And I don't know where that comes from, but it's a certain telltale. Like if you see that on a social media post or something, that's AI generated. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. And I have kind of rules, don't do these things. And there's certain phrases that come up all the time as well. And I picked up a new one yesterday. I can't recall what it was, but I picked up, hey, you've used that 3 times in the conversations we've had today. Let's add that to the do not use list because it's not something I would say. The other thing I've added, because like we were talking in our last conversation, using it in the back office. So I do use it to generate content, but that content always goes through me as a filter and usually gets edited quite extensively before it goes into the public domain. But what I've added is in the general prompt area, so that this comes
Mhm.
back, everything is disclose that you are an AI. So if I
Mhm.
ever accidentally think I have edited this and it has gone through my filter, accidentally posted before I actually have edited, it will actually
Right.
say somewhere this was written by an AI. So that kind of covers me a little bit. I mean, it's not ideal what I want to do because I don't want to post stuff by AI, but it's kind of a little bit of a safety net, I guess.
I think that's an important safety net. I'm clearer about when I use AI. Like you, nothing that comes out of AI from a content generation standpoint doesn't get reviewed and edited in a meaningful way by me or a real human. So I have a similar thing. I make sure that there's an AI message built into the framework of that document in some form, and it's usually not at the top or the bottom, and that way I guarantee that someone has to catch it in an actual full read through and can't just, like, remove it and have it be the thing that got removed. Um, I am I use AI to do a lot of image generation right now,
Mm,
partially because the way we look at imagery and video and content like that in terms of things like SEO and search visibility, and to a certain extent, even social media, is everybody's using a lot of the same stock imagery. We're not paying for stock the same way, but it also means that because people are cycling through the same Canva library or the same Unsplash, like, stock libraries, that images are showing up in the same places, and there's not enough differentiation from a brand standpoint. So I've started creating a standardized framework for generating AI graphics for my brand,
mhm.
and those are the graphics that are doing things like on my website, and those have captions of AI attribution on them for
Yeah,
that
yeah.
reason.
Yeah, and that's fine because typically, if you were to buy an image from Getty Images, you would have to attribute it, attribute the source as well.
Mhm.
I guess one of the with the area of images and art, and coming back to this conversation around the ethics, that's one area I am a bit concerned about, and my concern comes from because I'm a really keen hobby photographer. I can't even remember when I didn't take photographs. So, like, there's photographs of me at 3 years old taking photographs, and I do a lot of work these days with digital software to improve my images, but I do it in a way that is representative of what I used to be able to do in the darkroom. It's just now
Right.
it's digital, and I've recently actually bought an AI software program which um, tells me I can upload my image and it tells me what areas it thinks I should improve in that image. So it might
Mhm.
say, "Hey, the shadows are a bit dark," or it's a bit flat. Maybe you enhance the contrast. So it will actually tell me those things, which I find incredibly helpful um, because it shortcuts for me. Like, often I'll come back and look at an image 100 times, and each time I'll see something different, and I'll do a different edit. So that shortcuts
Right.
that whole process for me. Uh, but that's slightly different than actually generating an image with AI, and that's where I kind of I'm quite concerned about that area because where does the protection for the artist, the photographer, the painter, the sculptor, sculptor is maybe more difficult right now, but who knows? But the painter
That's
or the
cool.
the sketch artist, the photographer, where is the protection of their creativity and intellectual property?
That is fundamentally the biggest gray area that we see in AI right now, is how do we protect the intellectual property and human art aesthetic that is arguably innately human and that the AI is emulating based on all of this knowledge. And it's become a really interesting topic of conversation. I have some friends who sit on the board for a few fine arts colleges, and we're having these discussions about where does AI fit into the curriculum and the framework of how do we recognize that this isn't going away? How do we talk about it with students? How do we teach people to protect their assets digitally and physically? There are galleries now that are doing showings of AI art where people have created these pieces of individualized art exclusively with AI. And one of the things that we've been talking about is similarly to content attribution and transparency is if you are generating art or media with AI, that it now should have a digital watermark signature that cannot be removed. That's sort of like when we started locking music, for instance, digitally. That is essentially like a signature key that says, like, this is not a human-made piece. So in the context of, like, taking credit for AI-generated content, that is one side of the table. The other issue that we're still grappling with fundamentally is if your content is on the internet and is scrapable into a data set, graphics fall into that. Now video falls into that. That's why we have such incredible deep fake audio and video now, is how do we protect your assets so that they don't get scraped in, like, so they can't be scraped? And we don't have an answer. There are not a ton of answers for this yet. And that's part of where we are being very cautious. I am really specific in that when I generate graphics with AI, I'm not generating them against a certain style or artist reference. I'm usually choosing something specific like photorealism or a photorealism with a fantasy character, for instance, where I'm not referencing a specific artist style or a specific period or a specific creator like Pixar. Because, for instance, one of the things that everybody likes to do is turn themselves into a Pixar character. And that's fun, but like Disney, Disney Universal Studios just sued Midjourney 2 weeks ago for copyright infringement. And if Disney can find a way to get you for copyright infringement against Disney, you are in a lot of trouble because they have written copyright law to serve them very well.
Yes, that's and of course, I mean, in some ways, it's justified they protect that because they've invested a lot in developing or purchasing those creative assets that that are so popular. But the thing is, the more popular they are, the more likely people are to want to emulate them, right?
And it's interesting because there's a lot of argument to be said that from a copyright standpoint, anything that has a 25% difference from the original is considered not an infringement of the original work. So in the style of Pixar, if enough of the style of the image that is output does not match Pixar's model identically, it's not considered violating of copyright. What I do say to anyone who is in the fine art space, who is selling their content online or creating a portfolio, if you are putting your portfolio online, watermarking the images themselves, both in a visual watermark way, so like even if it's minimal in the graphic, but then also adding a DRM signature, which is something that I think Adobe is mastering in terms of how we seal those pieces in so that they are harder to be scraped into AI. So the way AI reads graphics is the way it reads data on a website. It's reading the metadata of the image itself, and you can add digital rights signatures, like locking signatures that prevent the AIs from being able to scrape the data into the system. And they're working through how that works. That isn't to say that we're not going to find ways around it, because everybody figures out how to pirate. But one of the other things that I've also started doing with clients with their websites is we have made them show up fully as static images. So the website backends are fully editable. You can still make all the changes, but someone can't go to the front end of your website and right click and copy an image, or right click and copy paste, like copy any of your content and then paste it somewhere else. And that way you have full, like, it still resizes, it's still responsive to whatever screen somebody's on, but it essentially is interactive, like a static image with no linking or anything in it. So links work, everything moves the way it's supposed to, but like the page itself shows up more image-like in its fundamental format.
That's interesting. Yeah. I certainly, I mean, with my photos online, I've certainly done stuff like right-click protected. So typically, if you right-click on an image, you can download a copy of the image.
Right.
That's all blocked on my photo websites. But of course, it's pretty easy for somebody to do a screenshot. And screenshots these days, if you've got a good monitor, you can get a pretty good resolution screenshot of a good quality photo.
Yeah. The other trick is compression of graphics in the website, so that you are not essentially showcasing an ultra high res graphic or image, in order to make sure that that is also not as feasible. But art and technology do not often go hand in hand, and they don't play nice with each other ethically or practically.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, I mean, the question of, is a totally AI-generated art exhibition, is that art? That's a different conversation. And if it's clear that this is all AI-generated art and appreciate that for what it is, then that's a different thing than copying an artist's style to the point where it's almost an 80% or more replication of what that person's created by themselves out of their creative endeavor. And it's just AI that's mimicked it.
Yeah, when AI, and fundamentally, we look at where we are, like if you look at where we are now with generative text and how far we've come in this last 6 months, let alone the last 2 years, we've come so far from where we were when we started and everybody started playing with ChatGPT. And we are still very much in that early infancy stage of generative visual AI. It's gotten significantly better in the last 6 months, and we're still seeing major strides weekly with it. But a year ago, when we first all started having access to generative visual AI and we were creating images, you weren't giving it prompts so much as saying, I would like an astronaut in the style of Degas. Like that was the limit. It couldn't come up with anything more detailed or more abstract. It had to have you had to give it essentially a classic style reference or a known artist reference and a subject. There wasn't the broad mix of options and sketch and photorealism. And the thing that is concerning more to me about where we stand with graphic AI is that we have people who have figured out how to create images that look very photorealistic and have generated images of, say, children in war-torn areas and then had them published in things like major newspapers. And you're like, that isn't real. Like, you have created something to sell media.
Yeah.
And that is the level of unethical behavior in journalism that is concerning.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of couple of things that kind of remind me that, yeah, it's a scary space. One is I get one of the many newsletters I get on the subject of AI. They have this little quiz at the end of the newsletter with two photos, very similar photos, and saying which one's AI generated. Sometimes it's a trick question. Sometimes neither are. Sometimes both are.
Right.
80% of the time, one is, one isn't. But even as a photographer with a perhaps more schooled eye than other people that aren't photographers, I cannot tell the difference. Like there's
So
occasionally a telltale sign, but most of the time I'm just guessing.
so I want to say it was last year, probably around Thanksgiving in the United States, so last November, there was an article in the Washington Post about how if you go on to stock photography websites now, they have to have an AI filter because there were some very realistic images printed of children in the Ukraine-Russia war. And I saw a sample of them in this article. And I, like you, have a background in photography. I went to art school. I was trained in it. I still shoot in it. I was looking at these and I could only tell the difference because I knew how to look at things like the reflection of light in their eyes or the way that shadows were falling in
Yeah.
the background. And if you're not somebody who knows how to look at composition like that or how to recognize that like there is a difference between the way your eyes reflect light than other glass or like glassy surfaces, you wouldn't necessarily know. And that's concerning to the general like to me, it should be concerning to the general public.
Absolutely, yeah. And even those, I mean, they're kind of the telltale signs I look at in these images. And even there was one recently of a cafe scene, an outdoor cafe, like al fresco, and the background was the actual cafe building with a glass window. And you could see some people inside the cafe, you could see activity, you could see the counter and so on, and tables, and then people and tables outside. Now, there wasn't a close enough view of anyone's face to check the eye reflections, but I thought, well, how the window reflections are going to have to tell, or the shadows of the
Right?
table legs and everything. Seriously, I could not tell a difference.
Yeah, I feel like we are going to be using with the way that we are using generative AI to create visual media now, that it's going to be like playing those games that we did as a child where you have two images side by side and it's like find the 5 differences. And you have to figure out what's different in both of them. And they're getting so realistic and so consistently accurate. And I hesitate to say that phrase. Like I don't know that accurate is really the right word. They're getting so much closer to realism that it is going to very much beg the question, if you did that and you interspersed a mix of AI and real photography in a news article or in a blog post and you didn't disclose, would the average consumer be able to tell?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's switch gears a little bit. What's the most fun thing you've done with AI?
Fun. Well, let's see. I've been enjoying creating cartoon avatars of everybody. Um, I did it as a test. I was speaking at a conference on AI, and one of the things that I wanted to see was everybody was excited by this idea of, we've been talking a lot about how you can just create professional headshots with AI, like take a couple selfies and then have it turn you into like a professional, well-dressed person. And those also look real enough that you're like, that could totally have happened. But I had a lot of fun creating a bunch of different versions of characters of different, cartoonifying myself. And the very, very first version I did was really early in the visual AI side of things. And I took a picture of me, just like a selfie of me wearing my glasses. And it like turned my head and gave me headphones with like weird, like cityscape type stuff around my head. It was very interesting. It was very futuristic. And it wasn't super cartoonified. Like I didn't look like a Pixar character. I looked a little more like a human android combo. Like I looked more robotic because
Yeah.
it still felt like I had skin. I didn't look so animated. But it was kind of fun and people were like, this is really wild. And then I created another version later that is very much an actual cartoon. And it's been fun and everybody has asked for them. So last fall, with all of my members, I gave them a form and I said, fill this out. Give me 2 of your favorite pictures of yourself, like with just you in the image, nobody else. And I'll turn you into a cartoon. It'll be a fun holiday thing. And so I turned like 15 people into cartoons. And a few of my clients have been like, who now use them everywhere. Like they're on their social media profiles. They have become avatars in their businesses. And it's one of those like stupid fun things that we've done. I also recently created an Oracle deck, like a creative planning Oracle deck entirely with AI. I used Midjourney to create all of the graphics. Like I came up with the concept, I came up with the framework for how I wanted everything to work. And I came up with categories and then I came up with a style like reference so that there was consistency. And then I just let the AI generate it. And I generated 150, 160 images that fit all of these categories and built an Oracle deck just for fun.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah. Well, the funnest thing I did this week was I got a parking fine in rather unfortunate circumstances, and I wrote a letter to that council explaining the unfortunate circumstances and asking for them to exercise compassion and to waive the fine. And I didn't hear anything back for ages and ages, like I think 2 months. And then suddenly on Monday, I get an email saying that they understand my situation, but they're essentially they were sticking to the letter of the law, and they were talking about a medical issue is only a medical issue in their eyes if it's immediately life-threatening, and I would need a written assessment from either a first responder or an emergency department of a hospital. And I thought, well, that's really cool. So I was annoyed, I was angry, and I thought about writing them a response letter and being annoyed about it. But I thought, well, they're threatening me with legal action now, so I'll pay the fine. And I thought, do I write the angry letter, or it'll only make me feel better and I'll probably annoy somebody. So I actually wrote the angry letter, but I didn't send it. And I said, you know what I'm going to do with this? I'm going to put it into, my first thought was put it into the AI, and I've been using Gemini a lot recently. I put it into Gemini and I said, how would you express this diplomatically without kind of being overly rude? Because as you can tell by the letter as it is now, I'm really angry. So it came back with a quite professionally worded letter, and I thought, that's nice. And I thought, I still don't think it's worth sending. And then I thought, I could have some fun with this. And I said, how do you think Stephen Colbert would respond to this? Because I thought, what would this sound like done by a comedian? And it came back and it was just brilliant. And I was laughing. And then I thought, how can I make this even more ridiculous? And then I thought, well, who else is out there that's a really way out there comedian? And then I thought of Jim Jeffries, who I don't know if people are familiar with. Jim Jeffries is an Australian comedian that works in the US. He's very liberal with his 4-letter words, very direct communicator, and very funny. So I asked to write it in the language of Jim Jeffries, and I was in stitches reading that one. And I thought, this is almost worth the cost of the fine to go through this exercise.
What? And you went from being angry to laughing. Like,
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
is a great. So in that vein, my dad is trying to introduce practical implementations of AI for strategy purposes to his team. And they're getting started with strategic planning for the year next week. And I was introducing him to a secure platform that I recommend and talking to him about how to use it. And we were playing around with different things so that he could demonstrate some fun things to his team and some practical things at the same time. And so he has two of the three companies that are in this space are golf oriented, and they're both mobile apps. And so he went in and said, if Golf Shot was a character from a movie, who would it be? And he gave it the website URL, and he shared like a brief description of the product, and then sent the AI off to figure out what it was. And it came back and said, Golf Shot would be Jarvis from Iron Man. And then like broke down, like gave a breakdown of like the character versus the brand. So then he did it for the other brand, Swing U, and he asked the same question, and it came back and he said, if Swing U was a character from a movie, it would be Happy Gilmore. My dad's response to that was, yeah, those are both really right. But it's a fun thing to show his team that like, this is a fun way to think about the brand. This is a fun thing that AI can do with us. That's a sort of lax, funny thing to start with. But then he also, sat down and said, okay, now do a competitor analysis and show me X, Y, and Z in this specific, and it gave a really detailed breakdown. He's like, we can do fun, wacky shit, and we can do practical things that are actually going to help us with strategic planning. And it gave everybody a good laugh.
Yeah.
And got everybody thinking about how to use it.
Yeah, that's another really, really interesting application. Yeah, assign a character to a brand. Yeah, it's given me a few ideas.
My favorite one, and this is something that I don't know if I know any men who have done this. I have gone in and asked the AI to act as my drunk best friend and hype me up and all the things that she loves about what I do in my business. And watching it like write a hype speech essentially from like a drunk girl at a bar is awesome.
Oh, that's one I have to try out sometime.
I'll send you the prompt.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Anna. I think it's a good point now to go on to the buzz. That's our innovation round, and where I ask every guest 3 quick questions designed to uncover a key piece of knowledge, a value, or attitude that guides you. So just short, punchy answers, whatever comes to mind. You all set?
Cool.
So what's the most innovative way you've seen AI used to strengthen human relationships?
To help people take the administrative minutia off their plates, which allows them to focus on human interaction in a human-to-human way.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one, and identifying what are those things, and even the AI can do that. I've done that exercise before. I've said to the AI, what can you help me with? And it sort of asks me first, list all the things that you do, and then it identifies the ones that, I can take care of that for you. I can sort your email. I can, for example, yeah. All right. What's, in your experience, what's the best thing you've done to integrate AI in a way that enhances human connection?
2 things for me. I use AI to do a lot of different testing and iterating, and it's been really phenomenal for me in content repurposing. So taking long form content I've written and remixing it into social content. So it's not generating original content, it's taking what I've already written and repurposing it, which has been a game changer in terms of using the massive amount of stuff that I have that's sort of living in different places and actually putting it out in the world and putting it to use. And for me, it's also just been recognizing that the best thing I did for myself and for my business was actually to create an agent or a persona that is trained on my content. So it knows how to output content that looks like I wrote it. So none of those pesky M dashes, and it doesn't gravitate into language that is AI centric. It gravitates into Anna centric language and phrasing and the way that I write. And so doing that, just that 5-step process that took maybe 10 minutes to sit down and put together, has fundamentally improved and removed a lot of the default AI issues that we've all experienced.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable thing to almost add to best practice, to incorporate that sort of guideline, a brand voice, if you like, into the thing. I did one recently where I can't remember what context I did this, but I was wanting to set up some prompts for a daily journal. I love daily journaling, but I really struggle to do it well in a reflective manner. I tend to do it in a very scientific manner, like I did this and I did that, and this was the experiment and that was the result, rather than, and here's how it made me feel, and this is what I took out of that exercise, and in the future I'm going to approach it different. I'm going to change my mindset or something like that, which is what I really want to be gaining from the journaling. So I asked, and I did this in Gemini again. I'm sort of gravitating more and more to Gemini. It's just, I think there's a lot of stuff going on in the background that are developments they're not announcing, but it sort of seems to be really coming forward in leaps and bounds. Anyway, I asked Gemini, how can I build some prompts to get me to journal better? And it came back and said, I can help you with that. And I said, all right, what do you need? And so then it asked me a bunch of questions. And one of the things it asked, and I said, well, I want your output written in my voice. And one of the things it then said was, give me 5 examples of work you've written, just upload it. And what I actually did was I went to some stories I'd written, handwritten in a journal previously, and I just photographed them and I uploaded the handwritten photograph,
Yeah.
a photograph of the handwriting, and took that and just said, yeah, that's good. And so now I have some journal prompts that come back. Now it's still not perfect because it's kind of every journal prompt, every journal output is sort of saying similar language. I mean, saying different things, but in similar language. So I need to get it to vary the language a little bit within those guidelines. But it's a good way. You can actually take writing you've written and say, this is my writing. Use that as a brand voice.
Yeah, I've trained mine on everything from sales copy that I've written to long form blog posts to interviews and email content. Providing that varied type of content has been incredible for how it recognizes the different use cases for me of, I want to draft email content or I want to draft blog posts, so that it doesn't default to writing in one way or the other. And that's been really great. I have been using an AI journaling app. Your prompts made me think of this, and I think you will appreciate this. I've been using this AI journaling app called Rosebud, and it's not free. It's $10 a month US, and it is designed so that you open a draft or a journal entry, and the AI this app was designed and built by therapists and mental health practitioners. And so the AI starts and asks you a starting question about your day, about what your intention is. Depends on what you're doing it for. There are tons of different starting points. But I do a morning intention and an evening reflection. And so in the morning, it asks me how I'm feeling and how I slept and what I'm looking forward to in the day. And I respond, and I can type it in, or I can voice to text, and it's got great dictation. And then once I've answered that question, I hit a button that says go deeper, and the AI reviews the answer I gave it, and then also uses the context and history of the previous conversations I've had and the people I've mentioned and the scenarios and the timing of things. And it continuously takes me deeper into what I'm talking about. And I can go as deep or not as I want. Like some days I go through my morning intention and I have gone through the process and it's been 10 minutes. And some days I'll end my day and I'll talk for an hour and a half back and forth and have, transcribed 20,000 words. But it's become this very interesting thing because it is forcing me to reflect. It is actually it's asking those questions in a staged way, but it is also didactic. So it feels like I'm interacting, and it's not like my problem with journaling is I never sit down and write against a prompt or an empty page. And so for me, the act of almost conversing with the AI in this format is really helpful. And then it provides like a summarized version of everything you talked about at the end, and it provides insights. And now I also have all of these data points. So as someone who enjoys the data side of things as well, I've found this to be an incredible tool.
Interesting. I'll have to check that one out now. Yeah, I think that
I
sort of in a general sense, using AI for this self-reflection, having those conversations and forcing you to dig deeper. So if it like, for example, in my journaling prompt, I've got a thing that says, if I answer you less than 3 sentences and it's purely factual and it doesn't dig into the why or how it made me feel or anything like that, ask a follow-up question and it will do that. And I think those sort of things that kind of actually prompts that force you to reflect, that force you to dig deeper are really helpful. And it can probably, I mean, I'm seeing uses in that area for more self-development stuff where you you can do a lot of self-development on yourself, where it's somebody needs to be asking, tell me more about that, or tell me more, or let's dig deeper on that aspect, and then reflect back what you've heard. And of course, the AI will reflect back what it heard with absolute zero judgment, which is the perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
What I will say, and this goes back a little bit to some of the ethical security thing we talked about last time. There have been a few times where AI companies have pushed updates to current models that have taken them essentially off the rails. So as an example of one, in May, OpenAI released an update to GPT-4o. And a lot of people had been using GPT-4o as a therapist. They'd been treating it like having therapist-like conversations with the AI. And before this release, the guardrails in place meant that it was not just blindly agreeing or hyping you up, or it was actually acting as a guided, guarded, guardrailed reflection framework. But when this release came out, those guardrails sort of disappeared, and the AI started hyping users up who were talking about really scary mental health issues and sending them the other way. Instead of healing, they were making it worse, or they were feeding into delusions and expanding on that. And that became a much bigger concern when this happened and they caught it. And OpenAI had to pull that release back because it was becoming such a widespread concern. But there was a period of about 2 weeks where it was online, and we have actually, a bunch of people that I know have been talking about where we asked the unhinged version, is what we've been calling it, to do certain things. And it was, in a lot of ways, it was like talking to a teenager that had just figured out how to teenagers that had just figured out how to roast each other and push all of those buttons.
Yeah.
And you sort of think it's funny in some contexts, but it's really dangerous when you think about the way people have been using it. as much as I am enjoying this experience with Rosebud, the reason I'm comfortable doing it in Rosebud is because it was built and backed by mental health professionals. Whereas I wouldn't want to go have that conversation necessarily in ChatGPT or in Gemini without some of that extra guarding framework built in.
Yeah, that's certainly an important point. I mean, particularly if you're using it for therapy purposes. I guess I'm thinking more along the lines of just self-reflection and personal development, help me understand what are my strengths and superpowers, those kind of self-diagnosis things.
Yeah, and but I would also say that as long as the guardrails are in place in the AI, it's doing that the right way. But if and you're, self-aware enough to know that if it's telling you something that is not right, you're gonna stop. But there's been some verging on it being too much of a cheerleader and a partner than a reflection mirror, so to speak.
Yeah. I'm exploring some prompts right now to get it to stop telling me how wonderful my idea is. If I upload an idea, it always tells me what a wonderful idea, blah blah blah, and then it expands on the idea, and often it gives me a lot of interesting and valuable information. But I'm thinking, well, hang on, in the real world, 8 out of 10 ideas, if I pitch it to somebody else, they'll say, "What a stupid idea." So I'd like you to not necessarily say what a stupid idea, but I'd like you to say, I see a lot of flaws in this idea and here they are,
Right.
as opposed to what a great idea. Yeah.
I'm building a persona right now that acts as a CEO sidekick, so to speak. And its main thing is to act as a mirror so that when you have a crazy idea and you want to figure out whether or not it fits in your offer suite or if it is actually like a reasonably good idea or if it's got marketability, you can ask it and it's got frameworks to do that evaluation without hyping it up automatically or like to actually do the work to help you figure out if it's a solid and reasonable idea in the context of your business model.
Excellent. All right. Well, that was a kind of a long answer to that second question. We'll go on to the third question. Got a little bit off track there. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves in today's world by leveraging AI in a way that prioritizes that human connection?
Don't use it with people. Fundamentally, what I would say is honestly the best thing you can do is figure out how AI is going to help you do more with the people in your business and in your life. So use it to help you spend more time with people face to face. Don't use it as a way to step back from those kinds of interactions and to as we've discussed, the back office thing is really sort of my demarcating line is use it to help you run your business effectively, but not to be in your business with your clients, with your audience.
Yeah, that's a very clear distinction, and I think it's a really good one. There's another question. I probably should add this to my buzz round, and it's something along the lines of what skill should we be aiming to develop as this AI thing kind of takes off exponentially going forward? What skill should we all be looking to develop or enhance?
Fundamentally, as much as we talk about how AI doesn't work without humans, which is very true, we also need to continue communicating with it like we communicate with other people. So in a lot of ways, we talk in the beginning of AI, and even now we still talk about things like how to do a better job of prompt engineering. But the real answer to that is how do you communicate clearly and effectively with people? How do you communicate clearly and effectively with AI? How do you communicate clearly and effectively to ask the right questions? So arguably, the skill that we all need to continue honing and prioritizing is communication. Because if you can ask or detail what you're trying to do with more detail and more clarity, that the AI will understand what you need faster, will do a better job of output. It's the garbage in, garbage out,
Mm.
good stuff in, brings stuff out. But in the same way that if I go to a designer, for instance, and I say I need a new logo and I want it to be modern and purple, and this is my business, and I don't say anything else, I'm gonna get a bunch of stuff that probably has nothing to do with what my brain, I am thinking of in my. But if I go to my designer and say, I have a modern brand, my audience is women in service-based businesses who are focused on growth. I like light bulbs and trees and birds and sacred geometry, and like colors should be purple and green and blue. Tell me what you think. And having that level of detail is going to be completely different from an output standpoint than what the first version I gave. So be detailed, be specific, be descriptive, but fundamentally, the act of communicating, the art of communicating is what we all need to continue focusing on, because it will be important as we engage with people and as we engage with technology. In the same vein, I say to people all the time, I don't care if Google and OpenAI are eating millions and maybe billions of dollars on me saying please and thank you, and like, that was great, because if I start talking to an AI more efficiently and I forget to have decency and connection in the way that I write, especially when I'm asking for something, then I'm going to forget to do that with real people. And that is absolutely not what we want to have happen.
Yeah, I've got mixed feelings about that. I'm very strong on saying please and thank you, and even at the end of a conversation with the AI, I will say something like, "Thank you, I appreciate all the information you've given me." And I usually get a response in fact, I once got a response that said, "You're so kind, I appreciate your words. Not many people take the time to do that." And I thought, "Oh, wow." But I'm in agreement with you on we need to learn to communicate better. And if I stop doing that with the AI at some point, I'll unlearn that when I talk to
Mhm.
people. The other aspect I think is important when we're communicating with the AI, it's learning from the language we put in. So if
Mhm.
it's learning to say please and thank you, and I appreciate what you've given me, and so on, then the output is going to start to reflect that rather than the sort of very matter-of-fact, direct language. And whilst it's always in agreement with stupid ideas, it's still very direct, and very wooden in some ways.
Mhm. I do think that one of the things that is going to be a big change as we get into more advancements in AI, both generative text, and especially as I think this is gonna be the year of voice in AI in a much bigger way, is emotion and context,
Mm,
and its ability to understand and incorporate emotion in context, both in writing and in audio output.
excellent. All right. Well, thanks for getting us through the buzz round. We did go off on tangents there quite a bit, but it was really helpful, I think. So, Anna, where can people find out more about you, about Wicked Marvelous, and maybe even get in touch with all that you've shared with us over the 2 episodes that we've done?
You can find me on my website at wickedmarvelous.com, wickedmarvelous.com, or you can come find me on LinkedIn. My last name is the only way, I'm the only person that spells my last name that way, so you'll know it's me.
Excellent. All right. And of course, we'll have those links in the show notes. So to wrap things up, Anna, what's one specific action our listeners can take today based on our conversation, this conversation, and also the last conversation we had on AI, and start applying some of the things we've discussed?
My 2 recommendations would be: choose a secure AI environment that is not free or open. So look at whether or not you're using a secure space that's protecting your data, because that's the number one thing you're paying with. And set up a way for your AI to learn to sound like you. Look at ways to do that. I have a specific training on this because it's something I fundamentally believe is a foundation of using AI effectively, especially in business. Training your AI to sound like you is the number one way to make sure that you are not falling into the trap of outputting generic content with AI.
Excellent. Great call to action. And we'll link some of the platforms that essentially put a protective layer between your computer, your laptop, your microphone, if you're using voice, and the actual AIs themselves, so that there's some level of security there. I'm sort of not absolutely sure how strong it is, but it protects you from the content actually being stored in the actual
Knowledge
language
base.
model, in the knowledge base.
The platforms that the platform that I use and recommend to all of my clients actually has license agreements with all of the AI models where the data stays secured and siloed inside my account. It never gets passed fully into the knowledge base, and they don't have any licensing regulation or requirements or allowance to store any of that data. And the company that owns and manages the account that I pay for and access all of my AI through does not have access to anything in my account. It's all encrypted. So they can help me with account related things, but they can't get into individual chats. They can't see any of the output content in my account either. And that is one of the reasons I chose it, because it is completely secure.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights with us so generously today, Anna, on the Innova.Buzz podcast. And I'm glad we managed to avoid any digital hiccups today as we got the last time. And thanks also for the last episode, because I don't think I ever got to saying thank you at the end. And all the best for the future. And please do stay in touch. I'm sure we'll have plenty more to talk about as this AI juggernaut continues to roll along.
Well, thank you for having me. I always enjoy our conversations, and I'm excited to see how we all adapt to this new era of AI as we move forward.